let's get started with session 2. And we're going to start out with going a little bit into kind of the development side of things. So we can, as developers, we can give you our perspective on how we see sites so that you kind of get an understanding of where we're coming from. And, you know, we kind of have an understanding of where you're coming from, and we can kind of try to meet in the middle when it comes to developing these sites. So PSDs are structured with layers. HTML is structured with the DOM. Just for reference, this is the DOM, this is the DOM. The DOM is the document object model. So while you guys, you see layers and you see things moving around, developers see websites as just one kind of long text file, basically like an essay written in a really weird language that tells the story of a site in its sense. It says, here's the header, here's the content, here's the footer, the beginning, the middle, and the end. So that means from a structural standpoint, content kind of needs to be in the same place. It can move around a bit, it can maybe float up to the left, float up to the right. But in the end, the header is your header, the content is your content, the footer is your footer. You shouldn't be, jumping around so that the footer is up the top of the page or anything crazy like that as you change screen sizes. It's the same story on all different devices.
And it's important to note that search engines and things like screen readers also view the document in the same fashion, a very hierarchical type of thing.
Yes, and just to give you an example, this is something I do a lot. I'm not sure if it's something you guys ever do, but here's the Nissan site, and I always saw the Nissan site like this. This is the site, so see here, we've got your navigation with all your different location selectors, and that's corresponding to this up here. Then we've got your primary navigation, which is this stuff. And then we've got, getting into the wrapper and the main content and so on and so forth. So this is how we're looking at the site, just to give you guys like a general idea of how we look at it. So sometimes if we say, oh, this can't move here, this has to sit here, that's why. Because we don't have as much flexibility as there is in the design stage, in the development stage, in the actual building out. Which then brings me to how you guys can have some flexibility. Because a lot of times what I've seen, we just talk about, well, how's this content going to stack? So we've got a bunch of different modules, and then on mobile, we're just going to have them sit on top of each other. But you don't have to just stack them. There's still a lot of room with mobile to play around with different things, to try different, menu buttons and back to top links and expandable selections, things that won't necessarily appear on desktop, but you can use them on the smaller screen version to give the user a better experience, because you're not just designing a way to smash all the content so it's squishy and it sits in a small screen. You're designing an experience on a small screen device. So it's how can a user really engage with that content in the best way? And in some cases, maybe it is stacking. Maybe you have 5 or 6 different small content modules like this guy here. You've got these. And here, maybe it makes sense just to have them stack. But then for something a little more complex, like that, here we have expandable sections. So you can drill down.
So mobile shouldn't be looked at as limiting in any way, but just a design challenge for you guys,
Yeah, and there's some fun stuff you can do with different navigation. Like I love the navigation. Fun stuff like that. So it's new kind of challenges and new things to play around with. Did someone have a question? I'm getting I may just be getting my own feedback.
So if it's expandable on mobile, does it have to be expandable on desktop?
Not necessarily. In this case, it just happened to be because we were dealing with a really large volume of information. But maybe if these were a couple paragraphs each, you just have them expand out on desktop.
Or you can even lay those out like tabs or something.
Yeah. Lots of different options.
Ideally, we would only like to write one function because that's just going to be simpler for us. But if you guys see, that it needs to be different for a different experience, then yeah, by all means, go ahead and do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I've touched upon this in the earlier session, but just to remind you guys, don't be fooled by the fold. You don't have to make sure to cram every piece of content so that the user can see it right when they load that page in that first screen. You know, it's okay to have stuff sit down lower at the bottom. It's okay to have things in expandable sections that they have to open and close. It's what makes sense for the site content, what makes sense for the user experience. How is the best way that you can present that content to them so that it's organized, so that it's accessible.
Both of you in this meeting then?
Yes. Sorry, brief interruption with a cameo from Larry. And use carousel sparingly. This is a website that came across a while ago that gives a pretty compelling argument, and it links to some additional statistics on carousel usage. You know, there's the main point, but why not use a carousel? Here's some stats. They did a user test where they had content in a carousel, and 1% clicked a feature. You know, so that means of all the people who looked at this carousel, only 1% actually clicked on it. And of the people who clicked on it, 90% of those people, stop that. That's another reason carousels are annoying. 90% of those people clicked the first one, never drilled further. And so, you know, they're saying the carousel is this big important part of the page, but the user isn't clicking on it. You know, rotating page content and a couple of different, and these all link to the deeper articles where if you have time, you should go back and definitely browse them. I won't read the whole thing to you now. And I like this quote, and hopefully this will stay long enough. Carousels are effective at being able to tell people in marketing senior management their idea is on the homepage. Use them to put content that users will ignore on your homepage. So those are some opinions from, you know, different people in the development, the design community who have done the research and see that carousels may not necessarily be the best way to go. And again, that's not to say you should never use them. There are very few things that I'm ever going to say never use 100% ever. It's a terrible idea. Except the blink tag or the marquee tag.
Yes.
But for most things, there may be a case for it, but you really need to, again, consider the content. And it always goes back to designing around your content, which, again, is difficult when sometimes the client isn't exactly sure what their content is. But that's why we have to start pressing back, drilling on the client, saying, you know, what do you actually want? What kind of content do you want there?
Yes.
Boy,
Question.
they do want lots of content like that. Is there another solution other than a carousel that you can think of off the top of your head, or is it?
I mean, it depends on what kind of content it is. And if there's no other way and they just want to put a bunch of stuff and they want it in a carousel, you know, it's the client's site in the end.
Yeah, they're paying for it.
Yeah,
so,
it's our job to provide suggestions, to provide recommendations, to say, you know, perhaps you might not want to use all this content. Perhaps you want to move this to a separate page or do something else. But if that's the way they want it, that's the way they want it. I'm just trying to give you guys kind of the ideas of the ways you should start thinking about things and the recommendations that we can be making.
Perhaps instead of dumping everything into a carousel, we, really, think about, how we're strategically placing the content, on the page itself, so we don't just have to like hide everything and take the easy way out of putting everything into a carousel, just.
Yeah, and at a certain point, it may even be an argument for another page specifically devoted to that carousel content.
Right, but those are arguments worth having.
Yep, absolutely. Ad media. This is a brief dive into the frightening world of CSS, which is where Spell and I spend a lot of our time. And this is basically the nuts and bolts behind responsive development. This is kind of more of an FYI for you guys, but I think it's kind of cool. I might be biased because it's all I do all day. But it's just something for you guys to just kind of get a little idea of what's going on behind the scenes. So media queries are what we use within the CSS, which is the style sheets tied to that HTML I showed you before, that basically give the browser the quote-unquote rules for how to display this page. Like, this is how a p tag should look. This is how a list should look. This is how a divider should look. And again, we come up with the same, we hit the same barrier that CSS in the end is a suggestion to the browser. Depending on what browser is reading that CSS, it may choose to render it a different way. I'm looking at you, IE7 and IE8. Yeah, so non-responsive websites have, one style sheet with one set of rules. But responsive sites have one style sheet that's broken up into different sections divided by media queries. And basically they say, if the screen width is a certain size or the screen height is a certain size, do this instead. And we develop mobile first, which means the first styles we write are all for how that small screen will look, how it will behave. Then as the screen size gets bigger, we write media queries like this here that say, okay, when the screen is wider than 500 pixels, first look at these rules and then overwrite whatever rules are here with this. So like, for example, if the small screen had a color applied to it, that color would still carry over unless I overwrote it. But here, like here I have this list item is going to go across the entire page. But here it's only going to go across about half of the page, and that overwrites that smaller style. So the idea is we're always looking at those same base elements. We're just changing the way they look based on what size. So I think these actually apply, so you can see what this actually is in. Yeah, these apply to those modules that I was looking at before. So basically, if you start at the mobile version, here they stretch across the entire thing. When you hit that first point, then I set them so they stretch only across half. And then when you get a little bigger, they go into quarters. Again, nothing really that applies to design as much. It's just something that's interesting. Nice to know what's going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, it's important to understand what's going on behind the scenes and have just kind of a basic baseline knowledge of, you know, what we do, so you guys can, you know, make more intelligent decisions about, you know, how you're laying stuff out on the page. So like having that knowledge is going to be very, very helpful for you, you know.
Yeah, and now we're going to talk about navigation patterns, or navigation patterns, as I decided to spell it when I typed this. That'll be fixed for the next go around. But a thing with navigation, and this actually is different from the Nissan site that I just showed you in terms of how it is structured. We usually see navigation style-wise at the top of the page, but in development, there's kind of a new trend now where in the document, the navigation actually sits at the bottom of the page, and we just position it to look like it's at the top of the page. The reason for that is the story of the page-wise, you get to the content first. There should always be a way at the top of the page to tell the user, I want to skip down and go to the navigation, but you shouldn't give them all the navigation to read first. This is especially important, and I'm going to do a demo in a minute of a screen reader to give you an idea, but if a screen reader is going through a page, it reads it like a story. So it's going to read every single navigation item before it gets to the content. Same with the way Google's crawling the pages. It's going to read every single navigation item before it gets to the content. And right now, Google's page rankings are based a lot on quality content. It's not about links anymore. It's not about, you know, how many times can you link to yourself on a page. That actually sends you down in the ranks. So there are a couple of different fun navigation patterns that I wanted to show you for mobile. You know, it doesn't just have to be all of the links kind of sitting crammed on top of each other at the top or the bottom of the page. So let's see, this is the, if this is what I think it is, okay, this is a quick kind of proof of concept I did for a client who I switched out their actual logo with our little RWD School of Rock. But this is the off-screen nav option. And basically, you have this, and when you click here, everything slides out over, and you get your whole nav menu down here. I don't think these actually slide out. These are just links. Yeah. So that's a nice pattern. And then on desktop, on larger screens, sorry, what happens is it pops out and it sits there the entire time. So that's one kind of way to handle mobile navigation. Oh, no, let's not go there yet. Come back. Slide out menu. Yeah, this is the Nissan menu, which I showed you before. Really, the only difference between the two is here, you're not really changing any of the content behind the menu, whereas here, you're kind of moving everything over. They're just different ways of looking at it, and different kind of styles, different kind of feels you can give to it. This kind of reminds me of the Facebook style. These guys know what they're doing.
I just did that on AT&T.
Yep. Going back. Yeah. And note on absolute versus fixed positioning. So an absolute position is something like here, where we're saying sit it starting at the top and left, but it'll scroll down as you scroll with the page. A fixed position would have this sit here. Actually, the easiest way to do that.
Do some live coding.
Live coding, guys. Now see how it's sticking to the top of the page. You want to avoid doing this as much as possible, especially when you're dealing with smaller screens or medium-sized screens where on a tablet or a mobile device, just because the way that displays fixed positioning isn't really well supported necessarily on mobile browsers.
Right.
And so you'll get some wonky stuff with the way, wonky being a very technical development term, wonky stuff with the way those kind of fixed positioning appears.
Right.
But the absolute positioning, which is what I showed you originally, that's perfectly fine, and the user knows where their nav is. It's right there.
Right, and then we can always get back up to the nav by introducing other elements, like back to the top of the page, back to top, and things of that nature. We're always very concerned about, screen real estate there. So when you fix something there, that's just a little bit less room that you have for your content, So.
Yeah, and actually here on the small screen version, here, jump link menu is another style option. And this site actually is an example. So if you start, when you go to the top, you see this menu button. And when you click it, it's just sending you to the bottom of the page where all of the navigation is. So you're not really opening any panels. There's no JavaScript involved, which is a benefit of this kind of navigation. There's no JavaScript involved. And it's nice. It gives a nice user flow on mobile. And I believe one of the speakers at Event Apart brought this up. If you're on a mobile site, and the navigation was all at the top, you get to the end, and if there's no navigation there, it's just like, okay, what do I do now? I'm kind of at the end of everything. But having the navigation at the bottom kind of gives you, okay, I've read this page, here's where I can go next, now that I'm done with this page. It kind of gives you a way to continue the user flow. It's a fun way to look at things. Going back up. Yep, cruise experience. And then when we're talking about where to position navigation, we want to keep in mind something about the ergonomics of use. So when people have touch screens, where is easiest for them to reach if they're holding it with one hand, or the normal way that you sit with a tablet in your hand? What hit points are easiest for them to reach with their thumbs? And as you see here, we've got a small screen, a medium screen tablet, and a large screen laptop. And I mean, there are touch screen laptops now.
Mm-hmm.
And you see here, so it's really easy because if you think your hand would be right here, really easy if you're a righty. This diagram is biased, so then if you're a lefty, just flip it. And as you see here, and it's interesting to note that many times on desktop sites we tend to put the navigation here and here, which is kind of the opposite of what you should be doing when you're thinking from a mobile first or a multi-device perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And in general, look around, because again, responsive design is new. There are a lot of different sites doing cool stuff with the way they handle navigation, the way they handle menus. So feel free to rip off whoever you see. If you see a navigation style and, you kind of put it in the mock-up and then you send to you talk to the developer and say, hey, I saw X on this site. Can we use this here? Is that something we can integrate? Those are the kind of conversations that you should have as soon as you have that idea.
Right.
Because A, then we get to play with cool stuff, and B, it can have some great results. Didn't want to refresh that. Wanted to full screen it. Hey-o. All right, now a note on accessibility, which we've brought up before, and I know I asked you about on that initial survey I sent out before this entire thing. And I wanted to make a note on accessibility. This applies whether or not we're talking about responsive design. This applies to all websites everywhere ever. But I thought, since I have your guys' attention, and since we're looking at websites in an entirely new way, I thought it's always best to bring up accessibility. And Spell is smiling.
My favorite subject.
Yes. Yes. So, responsive design is flex. It needs to accommodate to different inputs because you may have a mouse, you may have a keyboard, you may have a finger, and also assistive technologies.
Yeah, accessibility is a very broad term. It's not just for blind people. And essentially what we're trying to do is we're trying to design and develop something that can be used by every single human being on the planet. So that's a huge responsibility and a big, endeavor most of the time. But it's just something we have to be thinking about even when we're designing, the impact your colors, the choice of colors can have on people who may have, who may be colorblind and nearsighted. It's just huge. The amount of thought that needs to go into really, really making something fully accessible. It's just mind blowing.
Yep. So I'm going to position the phone so hopefully you can hear. If you have trouble hearing the video, please let me know. Again, the link will be available afterwards, but this is just a quick run through that I did on my own laptop. I had a couple different screen readers running, and I'm navigating using my keyboard, not my mouse. So just to give you guys an idea of how these websites function when people are using assistive technologies, because it's a thing we talk about a lot of times, and even I only started trying out sites using these technologies a couple months ago. So it's a different way to experience sites.
TD Ameritrade. Link. Skip navigation. Visited link. Search jobs. Or. Enter keywords. Enter keywords. Edit text. Search jobs button. Heading level 2. Contact and social navigation. List 4 items. Link. Returning applicants. Visited link. Contact us.
So again, that's a thing. I'll pause for a second. That's a thing where you see when the navigation lives at the top of the document. I mean, we have that skip navigation link in there, but you see you have to tab through everything before you've gotten to any actual content, which is an argument in favor of having a skip to navigation button at the top and then keeping the actual navigation at the bottom so people can get to that content first.
And even on desktop,
Yeah.
of having a skip to nav.
It's the way that the code is written
The
from
code
top to down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's just like a form, right? So if you're filling out a form, it's Mr. First name, last name,
Right.
and
Except
it just goes in
in-
order with the way
Mhm.
it's listed.
Except in the visual and the actual navigation is still
Yeah,
positioned at the
visually
top,
it's always
but
sits
it's
at the
not
top,
red.
but it's not red at the
Okay.
top.
Yep.
So here we have the Chromebox screen reader. That's actually a free extension if you guys want to throw it on Chrome and play around with it. And this is a site that you will probably recognize. I think it's the same site actually, but there's no video. So just to see if you were blind and you were using a screen reader, this is how it would appear.
TMP Worldwide, LLC. Navigation with 8 items. Home, link. Our work, link list item. Our expertise, link list item. Who, look, connect, link list, like, button, tweet, link. This page has been shared 52 times.
52 times, that's impressive. So this is the same video
TMP
again,
Worldwide,
but with
LLC.
the video, with the
Navigation
visual.
with 8 items. Home, link. Our work, link list item. Our expertise, link list item. Who, look, connect, link list, like, button, tweet, link. This page has been shared 52 times.
Yeah, and as you can see, the way that this particular document was coded, the social stuff is actually appearing in the document before the actual content, which I know TMP is currently in a refresh project, so that'll probably be one of the first things to be revised. All right, so tag clouds. I'm not a huge fan of tag clouds. This is one reason why, from a keyboard perspective.
SC, develop, agents,
Because that's a
Google,
pain.
marketing,
That is a huge pain.
digital
And then social plugins.
list
This is
with
my
8
other
items.
favorite.
Jobs at TMP, RS, Facebook, RS, base, RSS, base, RSS.
It just
base,
kinda traps
RS,
you.
Base, RS, base, Twitter, list with 8 items. Facebook, share.
Yeah. So that's just some ideas of, the frustrations that can come along with accessibility and the kind of things that you want to think about when you're choosing what kind of content to include in a site, how you want to order content. That's just another thing to think about. And now, I'll assign the homework in a minute. Does anyone have any kind of questions, comments, concerns?
Yes. Yes.
Nope, stop that.
Can you go back to the
The media queries
yeah.
stuff? Yeah.
So a responsive site has a set of, I was trying to understand, I just wanted, between media queries and CSS and styles.
Okay, the media queries. So the question was about the difference between CSS and media queries. And basically, media queries live within the CSS. We're always styling using CSS, Media Queries is just kind of another wrapper around the rules that we write in CSS, that, you know, a basic line division that says this block use with this specific screen size.
So, in layman's terms, the CSS is asking a question. What's the screen size?
Yep.
If it's this, follow these rules.
Yep.
If it's greater than this, follow the next set. If
Mhm.
it's greater than that, follow the final set.
Right.
Yeah, it's like a continuous loop of if-then statements.
Because you had said that, and is that in a non-responsive site, it has one single with one single set
Yeah.
of rules, of where the responsive is, it still has the one set, but it has a bunch of different rules.
Yeah, a bunch of different sets of rules.
Multiple rules.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm trying. Oh, there we go. I'm gonna see if we have any questions. Video on responsive design. We have a question from Mark. And video on responsive design. Do we want to say YouTube as
What's
the
question?
general?
You probably
How do we
have to
handle
touch
video on
video.
responsive design?
Video is a media element just like images are, so there's no reason why we can't take those and make those flexible as well. When it comes to mobile, what we typically do is we rely heavily on YouTube when it comes to video in the websites and products that we create, because I mean that's all YouTube does. YouTube is all about video. That's all they do 24 hours a day, is just handle video. So we prefer to kind of send video over to them to handle rather than kind of host it ourselves and then roll our own players and things of that nature, because we know that if we're going to send something through YouTube, that there's a better chance of it, you know, working properly across the wide spectrum of devices that are out there right now. So, but as far as the flexibility of it goes, we don't usually have a problem. We can make flexible video too, if we want.
The only thing I would say is if you're looking at a modal window on a larger screen to display a video,
Right.
On the smaller screen version, you would either just want to have it straight up open in a new page,
Right.
or that's basically, you just want to have it open in a new page, or provide a video link and let the device handle it. So for example, I know on my Android phone, if I see a YouTube video and I click it, it asks me, do I want to open this in the YouTube app, or do I want to open this, you know, in a separate browser window or in one of the 12 different browsers I have on my Android phone.
Yeah.
So it's another one of those things where there are a lot of different devices. They know how to handle this. So we shouldn't drive ourselves crazy on our end trying to design and develop all these different video modules when there's so much native that exists there. And YouTube has our back.
Yeah, they've got our back. Quite frankly, I think your video, if you host it up on YouTube, it probably stands a better chance of being seen on YouTube than it actually does on your own careers site. But don't tell the clients we said that. You know?
Yep. Any other questions on the phone in the office? Last chance.
Don't be scared.
Well, if you have questions later, you can feel free to email us.
You know, last year when we started, a couple years ago when we first started doing responsive design, we used to do a lot of the same stuff that you guys were doing. Like you would design for the desktop first, and then you'd focus on the mobile aspects of it. And about a year ago, I said, let's start doing this the other way around. You know, we focus on the mobile experience first. We focus on the base styles, and then we grow out from there. And it's been extraordinarily effective for us as developers to, focus on the baseline experience first and the desktop experience second. I
can see that even from a design point of view, because then that naturally pushes me into what my progressive enhancement is going to be.
Right, and it also allows you to focus on the, what's important to the end user, and then branch out from there. So it's been a remarkably effective way to handle development. And if it works for design, then by all means, start doing it mobile first. Yay.
And we're actually going to find out if it works for design. That was a great segue, because the homework is going to be a responsive redesign. Don't panic. We already talked to traffic, so we make sure we've got you guys booked out for hours for this. There's a job number for this. So, you won't have to be up till 2 a.m. the night before, as is the academic standard for that sort of thing. Bring that back up to full screen. Yep, the job number is here, and I'll send this link to you guys out after, so if you want to check it. So basically, we've randomly assigned you to work on one of 5 different client pages. So I went through some existing talent brews, and I looked at some level 1 pages, some of them that pose kind of interesting challenges in how to handle display of content. And basically, what I want you to do is redesign that level 1 page just looking at the content, and then rebuilding the page from there, just using the content and the branding as a starting point, but just kind of throwing out the layout, throwing out everything else, and redesigning it using this mobile first kind of perspective. I also noted here, if you happen to currently be working on a talent brew refresh and would prefer to use like that, you have those assets kind of sitting on your computer already, you can feel free to do that. But again, the point of this is it's a responsive page and we're going from a mobile first perspective. So to detail out the specs, it's a talent brew level 1, so a home page. Page must be fully responsive. Content should be structured in a way that it can flow naturally across the page, regardless of the size of the screen. Focus only on the content, features, and the client branding and colors. Ignore any existing desktop layouts. And for this challenge, we can live in kind of a hypothetical world where talent brew is a little more flexible than it is. So ignore known limitations of talent brew. This is just kind of about building your responsive foo, so to speak. So break away from the talent brew norms a little bit. And again, page should be designed with a mobile first mindset. So start with the mobile mock. Just for the, I know that it's not really the normal workflow, but just for the sake of experiment, just for the sake of this assignment, start with that mobile mock first and how all that content is going to sit on mobile, and then expand out and also provide a desktop or a large screen layout. And as I say here, your final submission should include the mockups for a mobile view and a desktop view. And during the design process, keep your workflow responsive. So I have a big spreadsheet that I have the link in this site to, and I'll send it out after the training today. But in addition to a client, everyone's got the name of a front-end developer. Myself and Spell are 2 of the people on the list. We have a couple, Debbie is one, a couple other of the front-end team. And they're kind of your point of contact. So if you have questions at any point in your design and you want to run something by them in the period that we have allotted for you guys to work on this, go for it. Definitely. They all know they've got time booked out as well. They're, we're standing by waiting for your calls, that sort of thing. So it's not only experimenting with kind of the school of thought behind responsive design, it's also experimenting with the workflow and talking to people. Deliverables. Submit final mockup files. In a PSD. Send them to me, my email, by Tuesday, September 24th. You should provide 1 mobile and 1 desktop PSD file. And for the purposes of this exercise, like I know client fires happen, I know things happen. The designs don't have to be 100% polished. Ideally, we'd like to see you put as much effort into it as if you were going to be delivering this to a client, but we know that's not a realistic expectation with everything else that goes on. So just try to get, if nothing else, at the bare minimum, your basic, this is how the content should lay out, this is the navigation patterns, this is how I want to handle like this big image or this whatever, this different feature. It doesn't have to be pixel perfect. And then after you guys submit your files, all the front-end team, your contact is going to review your designs and provide some notes, some suggestions, helpful criticisms for moving forward, how you would be able to do things, how you'd be able to do things that make sense with a development standpoint, with a feasibility standpoint. And I just want to note that we actually did something similar a couple months ago where Spell gave us a mock-up that we had to build responsibly, and then we got code reviews as well on our own code. So this is kind of bringing it a step back. I don't know how it'd be able to bring us a step back to like the account teams. How to get the right criteria for a responsive site. Content gathering exercise. That would actually.
That's a good.
We may need to bring you into that for sure.
All right.
We're not coming into content gathering.
Yeah.
No, into any training for the account team.
Okay, so remember again that the point of this exercise is about improving site design and code. It's not about stifling good design or just being critical because we're angry and bitter developers and we just want to rage at you. No, we want to create a positive, constructive, and open environment for discussion. That's the whole point of this exercise, the whole point of the RWD School of Rock. So we're going to come back together as a group during around the first week of October, the date to be determined, depending on when, we get everything in on the 24th, and I'm going to try to have the developers review everything by the first week in October. And so then we'll all come together, designers, we'll get the developers on call to review some of the designs, review, things we saw that were positive, some things that you should try to avoid, and then also have a larger discussion about how we can kind of integrate everything we've done with the workflow, with what kind of content requirements we have, and bring that out to the rest of the team, to the rest of the project managers, to the account team, so that moving forward we can, really integrate this process and really drive this home. So this is the link to get your assignment. It should, in theory, open up to Google Docs, and you may just have to sign into your Google account, but you should be able to see it without any other permissions. I'll send the link out after this call along with the actual project site. Please let me know right away if you have any problem getting the document with all of the assignments and the clients, and I'll make sure that it gets out to everyone in a format that they can actually access. If no one else has any questions, which I don't see any, and it sounds quiet out there, then I am good to go to dismiss class early. So enjoy the 9,000 degree weather.